Alright, guys, let's see if I can even do this fast. I wanted to make a recording about different types of relationships, and in the Pride season, there are already a lot of stereotypes. There's a lot that we deal with, guys. There is a lot. There are already some topics that really come to my mind. One of them being, so these aren't, let me see. I'm trying to figure out which one I want to start with. So I want to talk about, first, I'll talk about the dating aspect of gender. I mean, I've spoken about it before, but the dating aspect of gender, kind of from a more, like a more varied perspective, I guess I would say. So depending how you identify yourself, that's going to determine a lot of other things too, as far as like labels and things. So depending how you identify and who you date versus who you have an interest in a romantic or sexual kind of way versus who you actually might fantasize about, these might be completely different topics. So when it comes to gender, it gets complex. I don't want to label it as complicated or challenging or difficult, but it gets complex. Because there's so many additional layers. Again, how you identify yourself as far as your own like sexuality, how you identify yourself as far as your own gender identity, your sexual identity, your gender identity, and then who you're interested in. So say you see somebody walking around, you don't know this person, but who you find physically attractive versus once you get to know a person. I'm talking about my own perspective. So I would say I don't mind the gender of the person that I date. I don't mind that. I tend to not date cis straight males. I just tend to not. Mainly, I'd say the main reason for me is that, I really value hanging out in queer spaces with my queer friends, doing very gay things, and I feel like it would be hard for me to be taken out of the queer spaces, or someone who might want to, prioritize hanging out in the hetero world all the time, and then, on occasion, let's go over to, like, the gay area of town. I don't really want that. I kind of need someone who kind of understands, and I'm not saying that cis straight males don't understand, but I'm just kind of assuming that the majority of them don't want to hang out all the time in the gay parts of the city all the time. So that's mostly why I don't really approach them or try to date them too much. But I wouldn't say that they're never attractive. But I do have a hierarchy of what I find attractive. I've probably spoken about it before. But if I'm just seeing somebody, I don't know them, we've never met, we've never spoken, I would say I tend to like more androgynous looking people. That to me is a lot more attractive. I do find attractions also differently when I know somebody. When I know someone, when I've interacted with them more, when we're closer on a deeper, more emotional level, I'd say I can be more into, all different types of people at that point. Again, usually the cis straight males is usually the type of person that I don't really tend to go for. Or cis straight females to that extent too. But I would say that I'd be likely to find them attractive more so. Regardless. Not all of them. I mean, I'm not like attracted to every cis straight female. That's ridiculous. I'm totally not. There are a lot of them that I don't find attractive. Actually, probably the majority of them. And a lot of times, like, I'd say the majority of them, because a lot of the times when I learn somebody's straight, the attraction level is just like, oh, like, don't approach that, like, don't even try, don't even go there. Which maybe on my end is kind of small thinking, because just because someone identifies one way doesn't mean that they wouldn't be attracted, or that they wouldn't maybe develop an attraction. But I'm not, like, depending on that to happen. I'm not, expecting that when I'm, like, trying to date people. So yeah, I'd say androgynous. I'd say, not with toxic masculinity. I do like, kind of fluid personalities as well. And I would say, so that's who I'd be attracted to. That's like physically versus like emotionally, romantically. And who I'd be attracted to, like, on a more sensual level, I guess I could say, like, more, like, I guess fantasy, I guess I would say, like, the fantasy aspect of a person. Like, I'll be honest, like, when I think of an unnamed person, there's no face, there's no nothing, I would say, really, I don't have very gendered fantasies of people. It's pretty neutral, I would say. Like, there's not really a lot that would identify, genitalia or any, like, specific kind of thing that would be like, oh, this is more of a male, more of a female, more of a masculine, more of a feminine person. Fantasy wise, I'd say for me, people tend to be pretty neutral. Like, there's not really a lot of, like, gender details when I just think of attraction without a person actually being involved. Just like I'm thinking it up in my mind, that's where my mind goes automatically, isn't towards a gender. So that I find interesting. And I just really find that interesting. But so all that in mind, I think that's a start for people who maybe have a lot of questions and don't really know how they date, don't really know how they, if they're getting into dating, or, they haven't done any queer dating lately or at all. I don't know if I'd be the norm. I don't really care. I'm just my own individual self, but I would say, there are a lot of different combinations of things that people can be interested in, that people might want to sexually, physically be with, versus what they actually sexually, physically might do. Some people don't do sexual, physical things with each other. Especially during the pandemic, a lot of people weren't. So, it wasn't that often that I heard of friends or anybody really meeting and hooking up with, like, strangers and stuff. Like, the hookup culture was kind of definitely affected. And for some of us, that's a big part of how we socialize and meet people and interact and interact in a sexual way anyways. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that that's definitely something I noticed. It's like if you're not meeting people and nothing's open where you can go to meet people, and people aren't online, and then like, yeah, where are you going to have a date? Where are you going to meet? At a coffee shop outside, ordering your coffee on the sidewalk, standing on your X that's 6 feet apart from the other X. You know, I mean, like, there were certain points where it's like, how are you even going to meet somebody? Like, it just wasn't ideal. Like, yeah, you have the beaches, parks, stuff like that, but it was so awkward. And then to try to meet someone else who was comfortable enough to do it, it's like, man, this is like pre-vaccines. Like, I think a lot of people were really kind of like not comfortable with that idea. And there were a lot of people who didn't mind, who just did what they felt right about, and that's fine too, I think, whatever. But, yeah, so those are some things that I would say that, you know, is maybe important to consider, look at when you're dating. Just kind of knowing those things about yourself, and you might not know them right away, and that's okay. I mean, sometimes, you know, we don't really know things because we haven't been told about it or taught about it, or it's never really come to our mind or to our attention because it just hasn't come up yet in life. And then it comes up and we're in that situation and we're in that experience in real time, and then we know, okay, this is for me. Okay, this isn't for me. Sometimes that's the only way to know. So, I get it that not everybody knows. And I'd say I've found my own way, not by being educated in this way. I mean, my parents never were like the people to like sit down and talk about sex, let alone dating, let alone, you know, their idea was like, you're gonna marry a black man. It's basically it. You're marrying a straight black Christian man. That's it, you know. I tell the story that's like interesting, that like once I was like spacing out, like after church or something. I can't remember if I'd gone to church or met my parents after they'd gone to church, and we went to like Marie Callender's or something that's not like open anymore, but like I think it was like a Marie Callender's or like Olive Garden or something like that. It was an Olive Garden maybe. We're waiting in, you know, in the little front area because like they hadn't called our names yet, but there was nowhere to sit, so we're kind of like sitting there, just standing there, like just for a few minutes. It wasn't like a 30-minute wait, it was like a few minutes. They had to get the table ready, and we're just standing there. So I'm spacing out, I'm hungry, just like spacing out, not really talking to my folks. And my mom sees me like looking in the direction of this like black like manager, waiter. I think like he was maybe a manager. He was up in the front, like there with like a suit on or whatever, and he's just a sharp looking black male. And she kind of like nudges me or like smacks me on the arm or something, a little too aggressive for what the situation was. And I was like annoyed by it. And she's like, stop staring at him, kind of like making the assumption that I'm like looking at him because he's clearly an attractive guy. And I was just like, looking at who? Like, it took me like a second, and then I kind of saw where I was looking. I was like, oh, I'm staring, and I just happened to be staring in the direction of like the only black male like in the whole vicinity that's not related to me. And so of course my mom assumes I'm staring at him. Usually when I'm with my parents, I don't really tend to look much, you know, attracted like towards anybody. I don't usually look at anybody like that in their presence, to their knowledge, because I'm not comfortable like around them. My mind is nowhere near any of that kind of thing, and just like they are such a buzzkill that I just can't. But yeah, but it was just kind of an interesting thing that like clearly she wasn't even like thinking about, you know, where else my mind could have gone, or like I don't know what I was even thinking about, and I didn't even notice him until she mentioned it. So at all. Like, he was sharply dressed, he looked nice, like there was nothing wrong with him. It's just she just assumed because he's a black guy in a suit and looked good that I was looking at him. And I mean I was looking in his direction, but I wasn't like gawking at him. Like, she assumed it was like some sexual attraction kind of thing. And like, he was attractive, but it wasn't doing anything for me, and I wasn't like aware that he was really there. I was like looking past him, through him, whatever it was. I was just in my own head. But so that's an interesting type of thing that happens. But also, I've mentioned this before, but also depending on who you date, the person you date, the type of people you date, when the complexities of gender might come up, there are a lot of things that it's maybe helpful to know about. I would say definitely with and just like kind of knowing when to interact or bring up or talk about certain things. So when a relationship starts getting deeper than just, hey, we're buddies, or if you're not just hooking up with no like talking, if you do like have like some form of deep intimate conversations, getting to know one another better on a lot of different things, a lot of times in queer relationships gender might come up. It's kind of interesting because one of my friends, I was telling this to one of my friends, maybe like in June or October of like 2019, because I was kind of dating people that weren't cisgender people, and I kind of like, she goes and asks her gay male friends, and she's like, well, that never came up with them. That's not like a thing that they like ask each other about all these things. And I'm just thinking like, well, yeah, because they're probably only dating like cisgender gay males. Like if they were dating like trans guys, or if they're dating like non-binary people, I mean the conversation is gonna need to come up, and not like in a way that's like, okay, let's bring up this conversation because I need to talk about it, because I need to know everything. But it's like, no one really knows, I think, I don't know where I heard this, but it's something that did come up, that like in hetero cis relationships, things that kind of come up sometimes, there's kind of like this assumption that like the woman's more passive and is likely going to be a bottom, and the guy is more assertive, and he's gonna be more masculine and therefore dominant and a top. And then all the gender roles just kind of fall into place without conversation. I feel like that's how those relationships kind of go. The woman's always wearing a dress, not always, but then like the guy's always wearing a tie, maybe not always, but like you never really see like guys coming out in like skirts with the girl coming out in like a suit and tie. That kind of thing doesn't really seem to be any real sort of a situation that really actually occurs in straight relationships. I've never heard a lot of cis straight people being like, oh yeah, like I didn't know how they identified their gender or their pronouns, or and maybe the dating apps have it in there. I don't know. I've never been on like a straight dating app, but maybe they just have the pronouns in there already. I mean, the apps I'm on have the pronouns, they have the sexual identity, all kind of different sorts of preferences that a person might have. And I like that, because it's like, now I know. I don't have to like go through all that. Find that out later. Like it says it on there. It's part of the profile usually. So I find that really beneficial, really helpful, really useful. And another thing, I think it's okay, to not know, to still be questioning about stuff. If you're fluid, I think that's okay too. I don't think it turns people off, but I think it turns people maybe a little, like, they might think that there's always this thing that people think you're confused. And I feel like that's them being confused and putting it on you. I think a lot of times you can still be fluid. You can be non-binary. You can be, questioning or bi-curious or bisexual or pansexual or whatever else, that's, got a lot more variables to it. And possibly you'd be coming across more diverse options of people to, date. But I don't think that makes you confused. I think that other people just might be like, oh, wow, this is like so much to try to like get into. This is so much to try to like figure out. So I think that is something that's complex for people. But I do feel like in straight relationships, a lot of times people kind of like, it kind of defaults. I don't know how their conversations work. I've never been in one, so I don't really know. But I don't really hear my straight friends talking about these kinds of things, so I'm gonna assume that it doesn't really come up. Me and my other friends, we talk all the time about gender related stuff. I used to more often when I'd have a friend that was always around who like just really didn't really understand a lot of things about like trans people, so would always ask a lot of stuff. But I think they were just trying to figure out some things about it, some feelings about, maybe that have been coming up that were maybe confusing for them, and they just didn't really know how to like search themselves to try to like figure it out. To me, it's like, if I'm attracted to somebody, I'm attracted to them. Like, I don't really think much more into it other than like, wow, I think that this person is very attractive. And other than that, I don't tend to think like, oh, this person's really attractive, and then want to like explain it away. I tend to kind of lean more into it of like, oh, they're attractive, maybe I can get to know them more. Or, or maybe I'll avoid them because it's scary, or like, it can be like it depends on the person. It can be really kind of like a lot to deal with. So sometimes there's that, but usually I'm not leaning in the direction of, oh, let me like avoid this person. Or usually I'm not leaning in the direction of let me not talk to them because, I don't want to get involved because it's a confusing dynamic. It's a complex dynamic, I would say, for sure. It can be really complex. And when you have a lot of, like, if you are, like, in a poly relationship and you have a lot of different gender factors coming up with different people, as well as, like, sexual identity factors coming up with different people, it's kind of, like, a lot to consider. But also, it's just a lot. It's a lot. It's complex, but there's nothing wrong with it, really. You get used to that kind of stuff. You get used to having those kind of conversations. But I do think that the conversations do need to eventually happen. But how and when to start those conversations, sometimes it's even best to have a conversation about how and when to start those conversations. And then once you're able to know when it's appropriate and comfortable, because sometimes people don't want to just start talking about all this stuff. You want to know what the person, you want them to know about you, and you want to know about them. So I would say that is what gets so complex with relationships that are maybe not monogamous relationships, or relationships that are, there's more fluidity with like the sexual identities or the gender identities that a person's dating, or with their own identities, and all those areas. I think that's where things get complex, is because there are so many more variables than there would be with just like, other groups of people. Like, you're adding like so many more variables there. And then there's not always dysphoria, but with some people there is dysphoria in some areas. I think everybody in the world has some kind of insecurity, some kind of thing about them that they're really maybe like self-conscious about. That's not abnormal to have those experiences, even lifelong, even if a person's had them since like young childhood. That's not abnormal. I just think people don't talk about them often. And then when it comes to like sexual identity, gender identity, things like that, people talk about those even less often. And then, they usually start trying to like make more sense of it around times when they're starting to get interested in people, or when they're starting to date, because they have to meet people somehow. And then eventually the conversations, depending how deep in a relationship a person is getting, eventually you want them to know certain stuff about you, or eventually you want to know certain stuff about them. Like one of my favorite scenes in a show, and I'm just now thinking about this, one of my absolute favorite scenes in a show that I've never seen in any other show, if you guys haven't seen it, Gen Q of the L Word. Oh my goodness. So basically it was like the second season, but Gen Q of the L Word. It was awesome. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, so let me wait till we get to an actual 2 seconds later. So in the next minute, I'm going to talk about this for the next 60 seconds. So plug your ears. Or skip forward. So basically, this trans male person in the show is on Grindr and finds a dude that he finds attractive and meets up with him, and they're hooking up, and they're kind of like on the couch. I think it's like his couch in the place that he shares with his roommates, and they're hooking up, and he asks like, have you ever been with a straight man? And the guy's like, no. And that was like, they kind of just were happy with the whole thing. So, all right, that's my explanation. But I really just liked that scene because it was just so like open-minded, and I think maybe not everybody's life goes like that, but I think that just did show, positivity towards like open-mindedness. It wasn't like they were clearly there, for what they were there for, and it didn't have to become some, closed-minded situation causing trauma of another person. It was just like, let's, that's not what happened. It was just, ideally that's what you'd want to have happen. So I kind of liked that they kind of took that route with that situation, because I was like, that's so cool. Because a lot of times, a lot of us are faced with, when you don't fit like a norm of sexuality, a norm of gender, a norm of anything really, there are always these assumptions, especially in the queer world. There's always these assumptions that, everybody you come out to is gonna reject you. Everybody you come out to doesn't understand. Everybody you come out to is going to be awkward and ask you all these questions and doesn't really understand you and thinks you're confused and is going to try to argue you out of everything. So it's good to see kind of a situation where they kind of normalize some experiences that are very, it's very common, queer culture, like, okay, I'm not going to say like every queer person is promiscuous or has poly relationships. That's not accurate. But using like an app, like a dating app, or like Grindr or something like that, or like it's not uncommon for gay males to hook up with each other. Like, that's not, I'm not saying that it's like the majority, but I mean, the app has the feature because people use it. So, that's how I would explain that. There's a reason why it's on there, is because people would use it. Now, I wish some of the female apps would have that feature. I'd like to see if that kind of made for a different sort of setting. But I haven't seen that on there. But that's really what I think is interesting. I like that. I really like it. I really think it's cool. I really think it's awesome. I really like it, actually. So yeah, so that's kind of something I wanted to bring up, which is like something that I thought was really cool to see, because usually you don't expect that they're gonna make it like I don't know. The thing I like about the L Word is that like they almost took like a whole gay world and just made it so like it's interesting when you watch that show. You almost forget that like we're a minority. It makes you feel like we are the majority. We are in charge of things. You know, people owning their own businesses, people running for as politicians, people working for completely queer companies and they're queer, professionals, being able to be themselves, certain things like dress codes and all this kind of weird, nonsensical, traditional things that like some of us don't fit this stuff. So it's really cool how in the L Word, especially in Gen Q, how they just made it so much more relevant by making it so that like it wasn't coming from a straight like hetero perspective of let's make this from the hetero eyes and put our kind of spin on what gay life looks like. It's like, no, this is coming from the gays. They've made their own situation here, and this is what it's like for them. This is what it's like for us. So I really, really like that. And yeah, so yeah, I'd say when it comes to dating, definitely the conversations are gonna need to come up. In a healthy relationship, it's important to need, want, and have, and be able to kind of navigate those sorts of conversations, social situations like that. Is very important. I would say it's challenging. Oh, it's so challenging. But you know, if you can surround yourself with as many people as understand, then you know it helps you kind of like find your own way too, because then you're not always trying to push it away. Don't think about this, don't act on this, don't do this. It's like, nah, don't. You know, if you can help not doing that, and if you feel like you're in a safe enough space where you can not have to do that, then it's great. Some other things, I mean, I don't even know if I want to put this in the same topic as dating. But I guess I'd put it as maybe like adult content. I'll put it in that category. So that can be anything from, I don't know, like porn to like pictures and whatever, websites and things. I've noticed there are some categories that you don't really see too often. You don't really see a lot of female to male trans people in those spaces. You definitely see a lot of male to female in those spaces, and I'm not sure if it's because that's what the market says and so that's what people are doing, but I don't know if I believe that. But yeah, you don't see that many female to male trans, adult material. Like, there's not a lot of it out there. There's some, there's not a lot. And then there's also, let's see. Yeah, I guess, like, mostly the conversations would be important, I would say. Like, from how to have the conversation to when to have it, how to tell if it's not going good, and, you know, making sure that people feel okay about the conversations, because, you know, it can bring up a lot, and sometimes people don't ever really talk about this stuff with anybody. You might be the only person they've ever actually spoken out loud about some of the stuff they have to say about themselves, and so, you know, taking that into account as well. In general, you know, people talking about their experiences and things, it can be very eye-opening. I've learned things about people from different states and different parts of the world that I was like, I didn't even know that type of discrimination even existed, because I'm so lucky to live where I do, plus knowing the people that I know. I'm really just so lucky, and blessed, honestly, that, you know, those things aren't something that would be normal. Like, when I walk down the street, I can dress how I want. When I go in a place, I can mostly dress however I want, and people aren't going to be, like, not letting me in or having, like, derogatory slurs towards me while I'm, like, walking down the street. I mean, I've heard, like, people I live with, housemates and whatnot, but the one I'm specifically thinking about kind of has, like, their own kind of issues going on socially anyways. But I overheard one of them asking somebody else in the house, like, what's up with her? Doesn't she know she's a girl? And, like, nobody commented, and I'm just like, dude, okay. Like, you don't want to, like, approach me about this? Like, why don't you ask me? I can talk to you about this all day. But, I mean, I think the comment was more, I think it was like, does she think she's a boy or something like that? I don't remember what it was. It was something along those lines, but I was like, oh my gosh. But even if I did, I mean, that would be nobody's business, but I don't. But even if I did, whatever. But I was like, I'm just gonna let it go, because these people like to argue as it is, and that person is clearly, they weren't in a stable state while they were saying it, and it had nothing to do with anything anyone else had brought up, and she was talking to some old lady, so I was just like, whatever. But I did hear it, and very clearly, and at first I was like, that's probably not what they said. I'm like, no, I can hear everything else word for word, and that conversation was happening like 5 feet outside my door, and I'm pretty sure that's exactly what they said, so whatever. But it just goes to show that not everybody understands these things. Not everybody's had a conversation with somebody about this kind of stuff, or knows how. I mean, for someone to even, like, ask some other person in the house, it's like, how is that even appropriate? Like, they need to ask me, not the old lady. Like, what does she know? I mean, what does she know about my gender identity? I've never spoken to her about it. I mean, people can assume things. I have, like, a Chic Quattro razor. I have Axe soap, Axe deodorant. I mean, when I fold my clothes, like, the first load I always fold on top of the dryer and leave it there. They've probably seen I've got some, like, boxer briefs up in there and stuff. Like, I mean, I'm sure they've seen things that they know about, so, you know, but it's none of their business, and, you know, I think it's pretty obvious to them, too. Like, I think the old man mentioned to me once, he was, like, saying something like, you know, it doesn't matter, like, what color you are, if you're gay or whatever. And, like, he even, like, straight up mentioned it, like, so I was like, okay, I think that's just him. But I've lived there for a few years now. I think it's pretty clear that I'm pretty gay. I think they know. I'm pretty sure they know. But that's fine. So there's all that. But, I mean, I don't feel uncomfortable there. They don't make me uncomfortable with any of it. It's just something that comes up that you're just like, alright, here's this thing again. But, yeah, there's that. There's what else was I gonna say? Like, yeah, if relationships, or I don't know if you want to call, like, hookups, relationships, in sexual interactions with people, um, or more physical intimacy without maybe even sex being involved. I think, it's important to know what's okay to people or for people. Like, for example, there are a lot of maybe like trans males that don't like people touching their chest, or like, some people might use like prosthetics. I don't That's how I refer to them. Everyone kind of refers to their own genitals as their own things. They have their own terms. Prosthetic to some people might be very offensive and might imply like some kind of disability or some sort of problem, and that's not really how I use the word, but it's like I guess I should just call it genitalia, but not everybody calls theirs that. And I think it's fine for someone to have whatever they have. Yeah, I should look at that word prosthetic, because I feel like maybe that is a little, that could be offensive. Like, I'd say one of the last people I dated told me that that's kind of what they preferred. And so that kind of just stuck with me, because that was the first person who had ever told me that. And so I just started using that, and now I'm kind of realizing, maybe that probably doesn't apply to everybody. And I think it is important to kind of know what each person prefers to have touched, to have talked about, to have avoided or ignored, and what your comfort levels are with different things. There's a comment in the Real L Word where I think there was this one person, actor, her name was Jax, a lesbian female. There was I think she was talking to, I can't remember who now, but there was this one kind of character that would always, she was kind of like a tattling type, like in the LA crew. She would always like tattle. Like, she never really went out or partied or anything, but she had a house where everybody kind of lived there. Whitney lived there at a certain point. Jax lived there. I think it was the episode where they were saying like the house of Whitney's exes or whatever. And then they were outside talking, and then one of them was like, yeah, everybody sucked, every lesbian sucked a dildo before or something. And then they were like, oh no, like they were like offended by it. And it was the one where Romy came out to her friend saying that, I mean, she is bi, but she came out to her friends that she was dating a guy. And then it was kind of the episode where she was like, well, I'm on the L Word, and like all that kind of stuff too. So, or one of the episodes near there. But I remember they were sitting outside on like this outdoor furniture, and then it was Jax and Romy and like somebody else and the other gossiping tattling person. And yeah, they were just like, yeah, I think it was Jax that was like, we've all sucked the dildo every now and then. And then they're all like, ew, like, no. But I don't think that's too abnormal either. Like a lot of people like strap-on, so that is just what it is. But it was just kind of like interesting, because like when Romy started talking about, sex with her boyfriend, like one of them got kind of like squeamish, and one of her friends was like squeamish, kind of like don't talk to me about that, like kind of like how like people who aren't comfortable kind of do. I don't want to say like children or like teens, because there are a lot of teens that are plenty comfortable talking about stuff, and a lot of adults that are plenty uncomfortable. So I don't even want to slap that on the people, because I mean, people can still develop a comfort regardless of their age, within legal limits, guys. But yeah, I found that interesting. That was just kind of a comment that I'm like, really? Like, just kind of like their reactions were just kind of funny to me, because I was just like, oh, they really didn't like that she said that. But yeah, it's just kind of, it's an interesting topic. This was not short at all. I thought it would be really short. I thought it would be 15 minutes. That was like 30 minutes ago. But I really liked, kind of talking about this kind of stuff on here. I wasn't trying to get like graphic, or I don't know what the age ranges of the audience here are, so I try not to get too into details of stuff that would like deter people or make them feel uncomfortable or anything like that. More just for like food for thought, and kind of fun, educational. I don't want it to be too stuffy, but I don't want it to be so irrelevant because it's too polished or too sterile, to a point where it's like, we can't talk about sex, we can't talk about anything. It's like, dude, this is reality. Not everybody's having sex, but there are people who do, and there are people who are gonna do it, and that's just how it is. So I think if people, adults, one of my friends said elder millennials. So I think with all of us elder millennials being out there, very tech savvy people, I think with all the media being kind of on board with our kind more and more now, from what I'm seeing, and I live in like a hub of like media production, or I don't currently live anywhere near Hollywood, but it's within a driving distance, and I plan to be there a lot more often, and I'm actually considering collaborating with some people. But we'll see if that can happen, or if it will happen, or what might happen. But yeah, guys, I really enjoy posting this stuff. I just wish I had more time to do it when I wasn't tired. Like, I work at 8 a.m., so I feel like it would be a little rough for me to start posting stuff at 6:30 in the morning. Plus, usually I'm, like, thinking about this stuff while I'm working. I'm not really thinking about it too much at, like, 6:30 a.m. So, it just kind of comes to me more so in the evenings when I have more downtime. And less energy, though. So, I apologize always for that. Quality is important to me. It's just that if I had to wait until I had the time to put out quality content, I would probably almost never record anything, because I don't think I'd have both the energy and the time, other than maybe on like weekends sometimes, which is when I tend to record a lot more too. But yeah, I hope this is helpful. Just trying to keep the conversations open with the people you're interested in. Trying to develop a better and really good understanding of your own self, what you're looking for, kind of things that interest you, kind of things that like you would be interested in doing, like behaviorally, or thinking about with your thoughts, or not interested in, things that you're kind of not comfortable with or just don't want to do. It's good to kind of know those things. And again, I don't think anybody's going to always know every possible scenario until it might come their way. But yeah, guys, be safe out there this Pride 2021. Keep it safe. Always have safe practices in mind, like if that's for the coronavirus or any other types of viruses and diseases that can be contracted out there. And, I'm not to say, that anyone who has contracted anything, like, I'm not shaming people, but I'm just saying, like, you can still be safe about it, and still be respectful towards people, who have, if they do have a virus or some sort of a health situation. I mean, it doesn't mean they have to be avoided. I mean, they can still have a healthy sex life too. So just being educated about those types of things and making sure, you're on point with your own, health, none of us would purposely, take the coronavirus on us. So I don't think any of us would purposely take on any other kind of viruses either. It's just important, your health is going to be important. I do care about you guys, even if I don't know you. I want to see us thriving out there and doing good, even with all the adversity we have to face. I don't want us dying off. So, keep at it. And hopefully you guys have some fun dating. And, Pride is the dating and mating season for a lot of us. So I hope, I kind of joke about that with some friends of mine. I say it's the dating and mating season. But, yeah, just have fun. If you're going to have fun, know how to do it and know how to do it safely. And with that, it's getting late, so I got to go eat dinner. But, thanks for listening.